We've got an amazing panel coming up right now. I'm going to introduce the rose between two thorns here. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. I'm going to introduce one person. They're going to introduce each other. It's all chaos, but it will work. So I'm really, really excited to be introducing my good friend Heidi Musser, a leading expert in digital transformation, AI, and business agility. She's on the boards of C-Prime and the Community Financial Credit Union and the Michigan Council for Women in Technology. And she still has time to be here with us today. Amazing. Thank you. Round of applause for Heidi.
Thank you, Stuart, for that generous introduction. And I have with me my two esteemed colleagues today, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Mark, why don't we start with you?
Great, thanks, Heidi. I'm Mark Bélickzy. I've served as a CEO. I've worked for Fortune 50 companies, private equity, and investment groups. I've also run small to medium-sized enterprises and have done startups. I'm a serial growth change agent and a serial growth-focused CEO and an entrepreneur, or rather an intrapreneur within large organizations, which is oftentimes a very big challenge. But I've enjoyed that. It's like a salmon swimming upstream constantly your whole career, but you get to move forward that way. You know, my passion, and has always been in my career, to build highly engaged and enlightened and empowered teams that are excited to focus on and to deliver, exceptional results, excellent results, and have a compelling mission and a vision, and to steal some of Hunter's insights as we've talked about it, creating value, which is really important. So I enjoy the challenge of leading teams, and for the most part, I enjoy the challenge of getting out of teams' way so they can do their work.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Hunter?
Hi, good morning. My name is Hunter Hastings. My field is entrepreneurship. I've been an entrepreneur as a founder and a CEO. I've nurtured entrepreneurs as a partner in a seed stage venture capital fund. I've taught entrepreneurship at business school. And I fundamentally believe that our system, the capitalist system, the system that we're all working in, is entrepreneurial and not managerial. And that's the essence of the new paradigm that we're trying to establish here. So let's see if we can shed some light on that.
Thank you. I think we shall, we'll certainly have a provocative conversation, okay? We have set up this...
Well, Heidi, I just have one suggestion.
What's that?
I understand in some cultures where they do debates that it's important to give sustenance before the debate in case you need to have a break.
Are these macarons?
No, these are world-class famous tarts from Lisbon that you can't get anyone here. And
Gracias.
so if I hear a lot of crunching, I know that either I'm boring or they just need to go away and do something else.
And my gift to you
is water.
will be to wash down your
I've always
your
thought you to be a
pastries.
very kind human being, so thank you.
There's so much you don't know about me. Okay, we'll leave that for another conversation.
Well, by the way, I do know, I will share some with the team that Heidi is a world-class athlete, by the way.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Well, pretty close. So and her agility, preceded her in her athletic adventures and excitements when she was a few years younger, right? But still continue to this day.
Yeah. Afterwards, for gifts, I will show you how high I can jump. Okay. And it will be very high if my feet leave the ground. That's my bar today. So, good morning. What a fantastic opening to this conference. Thank you, Hugo and Steve, for all the work you've done. 10 years, okay? That's amazing. And in the first session that Steve Denning led with us previously before the break, he suggested that tech firms, tech giants, are possibly exemplars of a new management paradigm. That last slide he showed, you all took photos of it, right? Okay. He suggested that that might be the foundation of a new management paradigm, a paradigm in which mindsets drive methods, instead of methods driving mindsets. And then with his colleagues on the stage, we heard some great stories from Lars and Doug and who else was up there? Okay, Lars and Doug, and we heard some great stories about how these this mindset, this isn't just about big tech firms, but these are exemplars, or these are things that are happening in Andrew. And these are things that are also happening in small and medium-sized companies as well. So building on that conversation, we are here to focus on one big question. And that one big question is this: will the world's most valuable firms sustain their progress in reimagining management? So we're going to have a little debate about that. And I'm going to start, the first question I'm going to present to Mark and Hunter is this: what are the world's most valuable firms doing differently? Again, you heard from Andrew, you heard from Lars, you heard from Doug about what some of the things that they've been doing differently. But we really want to explore how they've reinvented themselves. What I heard is that they seem to have transitioned from bureaucracy, a thing of the past, to adhocracy, more self-organization and empowerment, one of the future. They seem to have abandoned Frederick Taylor's notion that the system must come before the man. I think he also meant woman when he said that, when processes dominated. And today, for the most valuable and fastest growing firms, the opposite is true, okay? The people-oriented mindsets drive both the processes and the extraordinary performances. We've heard 3 wonderful case studies about that this morning. People are more important than technology and processes. By the way, that's the very first lesson I learned about technology over 40 years ago. So upon studying 6 case firms from the Silicon Valley itself, Dr. Annika Steiber, she actually published a book back in 2016 called The Silicon Valley Model, Management for Entrepreneurship. And she noted in that book the management approaches that she observed in Silicon Valley, and they seem to match the description of that self-empowerment, that adhocracy very well. So, Mark, I'm going to start with you. Do you have a perspective on their success?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. First, I'd like to make just a general comment. Most of you have probably heard of VUCA, and by the way, that's a military term. You know, volatile, uncertain, you know, and you know, going through all of that, and complex and ambiguous. There's also something called VUCA Max, and VUCA Max is 100 years of change within 10 years, and that's really where we are today. It's the speed of change and our ability to be able to be adaptable, flexible in our organizations and in our thinking and as human beings that really is critical. So the speed of change and change that we're living in, we haven't even seen the beginning of how things will change down the road. So I just want to start with that area. The other comment I want to make is that Heidi and I were having sports conversations not too long ago, but we talked about how it's so much easier to train someone who hasn't learned a skill and show them the right way to do it than to take someone who has been doing something and say, oh, we need to adjust that. We need to change your behavior. We need to do this. So I have done different sports activities, and I've always found I'll take a young person that's inexperienced, and it's much easier to train than taking someone to change that sort of skill set. So understanding the significance of changing a habit is quite a challenge for an organization. And that leads me into the Silicon Valley model, which is, you know, these leaders were developing new companies who said, yeah, we need to do this differently. We just can't use the traditional industrial age model of top-down, bureaucratic command and control. And by the way, I lived in those worlds, you know, for a number of my careers with Fortune 50 companies. They were virtually, for the most part, doing that sort of work. And the other reason I'm passionate about speaking about this is my first assignment in a Fortune 50 company in a business unit was to take a business unit that was command control and transform it to coaching and supporting. Very hard work. I didn't get a playbook. We didn't have those at those times. and I had to learn and talk to best practice people, but it's quite exciting, and it's hard for some people, and some people become very enlightened. So it's good to go through that process, and I've done that with startups as well. But when you look at the Silicon Valley companies, you know, they shifted their bureaucratic structure to adhocracy. And by the way, these companies didn't invent the notion of adhocracy. Adhocracy as a term was coined 60 years before that, 40 years before that, rather, not 60, but 40 years before that. Alvin Toffler came up with that idea. You know, it's organizations that are flexible, decentralized, innovative, you know, collaborative, responsive. These are all the sort of things that we heard this morning. So these are what the Silicon Valley companies are able to do. This is in their DNA. This is how they've imprinted themselves and everyone coming into the organization, which makes them different. People-centric is critical. So making your team and your people center of your organization, which is critical. So creativity, flexibility, adaptability. They have these dynamic capabilities as well, you know, of being able to adapt and integrate new ideas, which is, you know, critical. Open to innovation is the fourth key area that for them, which is a culture of constantly innovating. And you heard that today. Fast, iterative innovation, which is, again, a cultural sort of piece of what you can accept. And then their key to success, flexibility, relentless focus on innovation, and customer centricity. So they were formed, they were minted, their DNA is different than anybody else because that's how they were started, and it's much easier to do that. And you bring in a culture like that. So it makes it very exciting, and there also allows them to be able to be better suited to the unpredictable. And we're going to see more and more and more unpredictability as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Mark. Yeah, thank you very much. Hunter, do you have a point of view on this?
So my illustrious debating opponent is very mellifluous, and he's trying to soften us up with these gifts, but I'm going to take the opposite side of this argument, and that is that while these companies we call the most valuable companies have certainly made tremendous technical advances, they're technologically superb, they haven't really made any fundamental change on the management side. They're still corporations, and that means that they conform to expectations of corporate structure. They conform in the ways they relate to financial markets, which often do a lot of the dictating to them. They even conform in areas of strategy and what they're targeting. And Heidi mentioned bureaucracy, and it was mentioned a lot this morning. And the key giveaway is that they haven't solved the bureaucracy problem. Just this week, with Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, talking about how Amazon has been overwhelmed by bureaucracy and they've got to figure out a way to fix it. So that's one of the most valuable firms, and they're saying, hey, we're not fundamentally different. We're still swamped by bureaucracy. And when Mark talks about starting outside the box in Silicon Valley, he's right, of course, but what happens when you're a corporation is the box descends upon you. It becomes around you, it smothers you, it starts to dictate some of the internal kinds of decisions you're taking because the bosses need to control, so they need to have control mechanisms, and the financial sector needs to dictate. So they're not really doing anything different. We'll talk about the mindset that has to change. That's maybe our keynote for this morning or for the whole day. But these companies are not fundamentally different. They haven't solved the problem. I'll give you one hint about the mindset, and that is that when we talk about value creation, we always talk about value creation pushing out, and the mindset has to change to market selection. The market decides what is valuable. It's going to pull it from you, and you've got to be flexible enough to follow that lead. We'll touch on that a little bit more.
Thank you for that, Hunter. But now, Mark, I want to come back to you for a little bit of follow-up on that. You mentioned that these companies are fundamentally different. They have been studied for years. We've mentioned the work of Dr. Steiber. I've heard them described as being ambidextrous, and that these valuable firms are simultaneously capable of both operational excellence and exploration. Okay, do you find that to be true from an ambidextrous perspective?
Yeah.
And I'd want to hear from you about that as well, Hunter. But first, Mark.
I don't think Hunter will be able to answer after. So ambidexterity is really more about multi-skilling. So it's your ability to be able to move in the world of operational exploration or operational excellence and exploration. They're not mutually exclusive. You can be excellent at things, but you can also explore all the same time. So it's the opportunity where they do that very well. And the exploration, and key for these organizations as things change, is innovation and venturing into new markets. They've done an exceptional job of that. So the opportunity to be ambidextrous and focus on operational excellence and exploration is something that they can do, and they're skilled at that sort of thing. You know, Amazon is a good example of that. World's most sophisticated logistics network. You know, amazing. Their exploration, and at the same time, they are lead innovator when it comes to cloud computing and AWS and developing AI technologies. And their ambidexterity allows them to dominate established marketplaces. So they have an organizational design that's generally, most of these are flat and that have dynamic capabilities. Where you heard earlier today that they're taking a lot of leaders and management layers out of organizations and allowing decisions to be made in the field where people are closest to the customers. How about that for annuity? And that certainly happens. And then you have visionary leadership, which is part of all these sort of things. It's critical that you have visionary leadership where they want to explore and complement, you know, the business and move forward. So ambidexterity is embedded in their DNA. It's just different. And if you would, I have a couple of kind of emblematic sort of things that I want to share with you. And I want to share a little bit about Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalis and human beings, which is kind of interesting when we talk about DNA. As you know, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, same genus, different species, lived at the same time, 20,000 years. But the one that prevailed were the Homo sapiens. So I've heard some people say that, you know, don't be a Neanderthal, you're going to have to look to change. And the challenge with Neanderthals is that they just couldn't change fast enough. They just weren't able to change fast enough, and that's happened. So by the way, I have a couple little tools I want to share with you. So,
You're just full of surprises for us.
well,
Thank you, Mark.
know, I am an amateur archaeologist, so it makes it fun. So this is a microblade. So this is probably 2,000 years old. Cuts like a knife still, but at least, you know, 2,000 to 5,000 years old. And then my favorite find ever was this tool that would cut bones to get marrow, do whatever. I found this in Kansas while I was digging. But it's rather fascinating that you have people that are out there finding and making tools, and you have people that are experts in doing these sort of things. So those are the ones that advanced. And then that takes us to present day, where we now have fancy things like this, which is a Swiss Army knife, right? So we've gone from these microblades to very fancy Swiss Army knives that I was able to get on the plane without being caught.
So that's my question to you. Did you bring these in your checked-on luggage or your carry-on luggage?
Oh, it was checked.
Okay, thank you.
And it has my dog on it. So.
Okay.
So it's a different DNA. And you're seeing, and I'll talk about it later, you're seeing more traditional companies that have been around a long time, or even what Bayer is doing, which is so impressive, to change, to be able to drive innovation, to drive a better experience, to drive value to the customers, and they're just rearranging how they're doing it so that, you know, they're able to move forward. And the other thing too about Silicon Valley companies is they put outcomes first. They said, we need these kind of outcomes first. And guess what? The structure will follow us. So it's putting structure behind what the desired outcomes are, and said, we'll figure how we need to look, but let's just focus on these sort of things, and then the structure evolves around an operating system that can evolve and be nimble and agile and flexible and adaptable.
So Mark, it's your assertion that they have reinvented themselves.
It
And
is.
you've described how. Hunter, what say you?
Have you noticed how good Mark is at distracting us? So,
Here's this
'cause
country
he's got the weak side of the argument. So let me just talk about ambidextrousness for a short time. It's a great coinage by Dr. Annika Steiber describing Google, especially, and some of the Silicon Valley companies. But if you think about it, it can't be the answer because it says we've got to be two different things. We're not sure. We don't have the balance. This isn't figured out. It means we're not smooth. They don't have flow. And it comes from complex adaptive systems theory, which says that the only way to harness one of these systems that's VUCA, to use Mark's term, is explore and exploit. So explore is the experiments that you run to try and find a good answer, and then exploit is you keep on doing that one thing that works. And what happens over time is that once you start something to exploit, you have this cash flow that is coming, it's steady, you divert yourself from the exploration part, and the balance gets out of whack. So ambidextrousness is not the answer, and I'll come back to an example of that. But in terms of have they reinvented themselves, I would say no, and I'll give you some examples. We've got rock star CEOs. So in the days of complex adaptive systems, how can we still think that you can assign so much influence and so much authority and so much stature to one person? That doesn't indicate reinvention. If you've got a CEO, then you've got the hierarchical levels because there have to be some layers over which they're the CEO too. So if you've got hierarchies, you've got distance, you've got people a long way from the customer, you've got thicker walls that the customer information has to get through. So that is still the case. And my friend Kurt tells me there are 25 layers at Google. I don't know whether that's right, but it's indicative of the issue. Sorry? 12. Okay, I exaggerated a little bit. And then if you've got the hierarchies, then you've got the departments and the subsidiaries and the divisions, and you've got demarcations, and you've got a lot of things getting in the way of the flow that you're trying to create to move as fast as the marketplace. So all of these things are still in place. They're not reinvented. I'll pick out a couple of departments that we have to figure out how to solve. The HR department, which was developed decades ago, maybe centuries ago, to keep the lid on the pot, to stop everybody from over-creating and rebelling and doing things that the bosses didn't want to do. And it still tends to be the way of the HR department. So that's an issue we have to think about. Finance is another one because it doesn't have the customer in primary mind. It's thinking about the financial markets and reporting and manipulating numbers and those kinds of things. So that's a problem that we have to think about. So over time, as the box descends, these companies lose that entrepreneurial intent that the market need that birthed them in the first place, and these distortions come into place. So I think that reinvention is a little bit of an overclaim. They're corporations.
So Hunter, interesting. I'm going to stay with you for a second on this. So have these firms come to be seen, are they going to come to be seen as the robber barons of the 21st century? And for those that are not familiar with that term, Hunter, you wrote about this in the book you co-authored with Steve Denning, Aberrant Capitalism. So tell us a little bit about these robber barons as they came to be known. And if these successful firms are coming to become these, what should they do about it?
Yeah, so I don't know whether everyone's familiar with the term robber baron. Probably you are, but you go back to the middle of the 19th century. We had great entrepreneurs then who built great companies with the most advanced technology. They built railroads, and they built roads, and they built factories. They brought affordable illumination and communication and a civilization elevating kind of a entrepreneurial innovation to the world. They made thousands, millions, perhaps even billions of lives better in a very consistent, broad fashion. And even so, they were criticized by some snipers from the sidelines, and robber barons came up as the sniper term. But in fact, they were able to elevate themselves over that criticism because they improved so many lives, and that was obvious. And when they retired, they became great philanthropists. So they extended this civilizing influence beyond their activities as entrepreneurs and into their activities as philanthropists. So the term was there, the companies elevated above it, because they talked about the entrepreneurial ethic. And the entrepreneurial ethic is, I serve you, I make your life better, that's what drives me, I take the market reward in return. These companies that we have today, these most valuable companies, don't emphasize the entrepreneurial ethic. And they've opened themselves and capitalism up to criticism from those same type of criticizers, but they're not fending it off, they're not elevating. In fact, I would say with driving shareholder value and shareholder value maximization and some of these other kinds of terms, they've opened up a wound. They've made all of us susceptible to this criticism. And if young people are deterred from capitalism and entrepreneurship, then we've got a real problem coming up. And I think they have opened that wound. I think it's going to fester unless all of us in this room do something about it. So that's something I'm passionate about. They're opening themselves up to the criticism.
Something to watch out for sure. Mark, briefly, would you like to respond to that?
I would love to respond to it.
Okay.
Actually, this is an area where I probably agree with Hunter on. You know, while this is a debate, and I looked for data against it, it was kind of hard, so you have to use evidence-based information to move forward. But the comparison that Robert Barron's is, you know, they have immense influence. You know, these today's large organizations, tech giants, influence and wealth, right? And if any of you watched, you know, Facebook chairman being interviewed in Congress, it was interesting, and publicly apologized to people for, you know, problems that their system has generated. But, you know, the perception is fueled by market dominance. You know, they have market dominance out there. Data privacy issues and their labor practice issues. From a concerns point of view that, you know, are raised, there's a question about competitiveness and fairness. You know, will there be competition out there? Will they drown out competition? Competition is healthy. It's better for consumers to have competition. So that is a question. There are exploitation fears. Hunter, you mentioned that, so you can be exploiting things. There are some proactive steps that these companies can take. Ethical leadership, and we won't talk about it, but it's important. Fostering healthy competition, we talked about that. Investing in social good, you know, rather than just focusing on this. So doing well while doing good is a possibility with organizations. And frankly, the need to rebuild engagement with regulators and communities. Have a voice, invite people in, have a dialogue, and talk about things. So don't bury your head in the sand, but participate in what's happening and be part of the broader positive ecosystem that is out there. You know, they have an opportunity, you know, to really be stewards of positive change if they so choose to do it. That is really a possibility.
If. That is a very powerful two-letter word, if. Okay, so new question here. Are the world's most valuable firms positioned to seize the opportunities created by the accelerating rate of technology change? Or are they too focused on sustaining the firm's future? Or is it possible that they're doing both at the same time? Hunter?
Well, I'll make 4 points to think about here. One is, we've talked about it a little bit. When Steve and I wrote the book, Aberrant Capitalism, we looked at the causes of entropy. Entropy is a, you know, thermodynamic word, just means that good work starts to become to wasted work and bad work, and things get worse over time. And so I think these corporations have at least 4 of the traits that we identified in our book. One we've talked about, which is the problem of a corporate form and the inability to solve the bureaucracy problem. If we don't do that, then the box descends and we can't succeed. The second one I'd call the non-neutral technology problem. Technology can move on its own. It develops on its own track. There's a great book by Brian Arthur on that trend. These big corporations are not using that neutral technology and watching where it goes. They're building their own proprietary technologies. And we talk all the time about network effects, which are tremendous for value creation, but their network effects of corporate networks, closed networks, walled garden networks. And so what happens if technology takes another direction and the walled garden is no longer tenable and customers get their network effects from elsewhere? So that's an issue, the non-neutral technology problem. I think the third issue is the wrong relationship with consumers. We haven't talked about that much, but a lot of this technology is being used for tracking and surveillance. And I'm not making a political point, I'm just saying, what if customers no longer want that deal? The deal is a lot of the costs are indirect to you because we're tracking and surveilling, and then we can monetize that through various ways, including crappy advertising on the internet, which I think has destroyed a lot of lives. But all that being the case, it's the tracking and surveillance mechanism. I think that's the wrong relationship with consumers, and it could go wrong. I think they have the wrong relationship with government as well, in a little bit opposite way of thinking to Marx, which is that they're very close to government, they've got government contracts, they find ways to use regulations to build monopolies around them. In some cases, they write the regulations. There's a lot of talk about that in Silicon Valley. So I think those four trends that Steve and I identified still apply today.
Mark, 1 minute for you.
1 minute
Rebuttal.
for me. All
Yes,
right.
1 minute rebuttal.
Wow, 10 minutes to 1 minute. So I like that. Thank you. So I agree. Critical crossroads for these organizations. It's a pivotal time for them to really think about what's happening. Their opportunity to, from technological change, ensuring long-term sustainability is possible. I'll go quickly. Seizing technological opportunities, I think they'll be able to do it. Agility, innovation, sustaining the future. So they, both larger organizations, Apple and Microsoft, want to be carbon neutral in 6 years. 6 years. So there's a lot of work that they're going to be doing in that area. Balancing innovation and sustainability. Rapid innovation, long-term sustainability. That's something they have to balance. It is a balancing act, and it is very challenging. But I think they have the DNA in order to be able to do that. They have really good DNA. And they're going to be focused, continued to focus on integration of innovation and sustainability. I think that'll be successful for them.
So what key risks have emerged? Okay, what are the obstacles that we know of today? I'm sure there'll be new ones tomorrow that will become risks if they're ignored. Here we are almost 10 years later in the age of AI. Today, advances in language-based AI, they're ushering a new era of disruption at an incomprehensible pace. I'm confident that every one of you here, every one of your organizations is being confronted with these types of challenges. Of course, we all know that the history of AI began a long time ago, before some of these technology innovations in the 1980s, the technology innovations that the world's most valuable firms are built on. But what we're seeing is that everything from science to business to society itself is being transformed. The positive impact on human society and creativity and productivity will be massive. I truly do believe that. Speed and agility, they're more critical than ever. Indeed, I would suggest that rapidly adapting to this accelerating rate of technological change may be the competitive advantage of the 21st century. So while it may be true that all arguments have to be reframed based on the speed of change and the shift of the change curve itself, what are the other key risks that we must focus on as we reimagine Agile, as we reimagine management for the modern business world? Okay, Mark, do you want to start us off with that?
Sure, thank you. Again, I probably will agree with Hunter on all these, even though it's a debate. I think that we've had some discussions about this. But there are several key risks. There are 5 major ones, and I'll be quick about it. There's regulatory risks, growing regulatory scrutiny. We're seeing that in the U.S. pretty regularly. Antitrust investigations about too big of an organization, and it's a problem. Tax digital services, is an issue. They're stifling innovation of other sort of people, so that's one. Cybersecurity threats. They get so big, and they're in this digital sort of infrastructure that cybersecurity risks make them a huge target. So their opportunity is in investing in their cybersecurity so that it moves forward. And as a CEO, that's one of the big things that I've always worked on, which is it's important and it's vital. Innovation fatigue and market saturation. As they grow and they get bigger and there's innovation, people get tired. There's a fatigue point that they might hit. So that's something they'll have to figure out. Overextension risks, spreading resources too thin within these organizations, not supporting them enough is a challenge. Ethical and social risks are important. So labor practices, sustainability, ethical behaviors is another one. And the last one is talent management. Retaining top management and top talent is going to be an opportunity for them. Bureaucracy risk, Hunter mentioned that, is still a thing. Even though they seem to be more flat and they've reduced labor levels, you still have some bureaucracy risk for that. And then the firms have to continue to invest in people, creativity, and flexibility. And it's an ongoing investment. If they don't, they're going to lose that edge.
Hunter?
So in the world of complex systems, risk is the wrong word to use, and risk is the wrong lens to look through. And the better lens is uncertainty. So emergence is the property of complex systems. New patterns emerge. There's nothing we can do about them. You can just observe them, and then you've got to find a way to channel them. Risk is an old concept where you can write it down. Mark just gave us a list. Here are the risks. Yeah. But you can't write down uncertainties and emergence. You can calculate risk. Well, you can't calculate uncertainty. You can hedge risk. Well, you can't hedge uncertainty. So as we go for the new management paradigm, we've got to change this mindset from risk to uncertainty. And uncertainty, I'll give Mark his due, he talked about unpredictability. Well, that's exactly it. You can't forecast the future, so let's stop trying. And so we've got to embrace complexity. We want more complexity. We want to find ways to immerse ourselves in complexity. And that's actually the promise of some of these most valuable companies, that they are creating more complexity. So let's not think about risk. Let's think about uncertainty and how we live in that world. And the idea of adaptiveness is not adjustment. It's living in complexity and making changes all the time, and that becomes your natural way of doing things. So it's not risk.
Okay, so it's possible that the big tech firms may not be encumbered by this. They may actually be ready for this and not even know it yet. They might not realize it. Okay, so I understand we have there's numbers flashing in front of me, and they're in red, okay? So we're going to be wrapping things up here a little bit, and what I'd like to do is kind of present a closing question to each of you. We see how difficult it is to evolve and to transform to modern ways of working. Is it easy for any of you, okay? And if so, I want to speak with you after, okay? So what does it take to be able to embrace this radical speed of change? Which corporations will be able to change at the speed of the market, the speed of the technological change, and completely embrace these new management paradigms as they emerge? Mark?
Thank you. I have 4 points. And then 3 sub-points.
Mark loves lists. He's a great list maker.
I'm sorry, a dad with 5 kids, we had a lot of lists.
He does have sub-points.
Yeah. And, but agility and flexibility, companies need to be decentralized, and I'll make it quick. Culture of continuous learning. So being a learning organization, we've heard that for how long? Yes, be a real learning organization. Visionary leadership. We still need leaders in organizations, wherever that role, or however you define leadership, is they need to provide leadership, embracing change and provide, navigate uncertainty. And then which corporations are best positioned? I think big tech leaders like Amazon and Google, they're more flat. I think they're going to be able to, do well. Disruptive innovators like Tesla and SpaceX, they have a nice risk tolerance, and I think they're going to continue to take risky sort of ventures and make them successful. And actually, I looked at some traditional companies and with a growth mindset, and I did this analysis last week. P&G, Walmart, Ford, 3M, Nike, Unilever, Siemens, Nestle, Mercedes, Heineken, John Deere, Caterpillar, Kraft, 3M, Pepsi, IKEA, Volvo. These are firms that are employing agile elements to their businesses, and we're seeing some good stock valuation over the last 3 years. So I think you're going to see that movement over time. So agile innovation, visionary leadership will be the key drivers.
Thank you, Mark. Hunter?
So in a debate, there are 2 points of view and also 2 styles. So Mark left us with a list. I'm going to leave us with a generalization. And that is that the mindset that Steve and Richard Straub and others have talked about is the challenge to us. And we've got to take an extreme point of view in that challenge. We have to have a mindset of complete and utter renunciation of all of the traditional ways of managing that we've talked about, control and methodology and process and so on like that. And just put that in your mind, complete and utter renunciation. You have to clear your head of all of those things. It's very, very difficult to do, but it's what we're challenged to do. And Mark talked about chaos, and chaos sounds scary, but actually it's the destination. So if you think of the continuum from control, which is where we've been, to chaos, which is what some people call emergence in complex adaptive systems, we've got to keep going in that direction. And it's scary and it's hard, and a lot of people are going to tell us it's not the right thing to do, but we've got to keep going towards chaos. And sometimes we'll be pushed back, but we've got to go in that direction. We don't understand it. We haven't got the right mindset for it yet. We don't have it under control. So chaos is good. The opportunity set in chaos is unbounded. We've got to figure out our way through that. And so I would say that traditional management is the opposite of that, and we have got to embrace this complexity and chaos in new ways that we don't really understand yet.
Thank you, Hunter, and thank you, Mark. What I'd like to just wrap things up with is just a couple comments here. I think we all know this. We live in a world of constant change. And it's not just the accelerated rate, but the accelerating rates of this innovation. They're continuing to drive both customers and employees, are driving people to continually interact with organizations in new and unique ways. Yes, it's true that companies will need a strong digital core and investments in people, to be able to reap the value of these technological innovations in a responsible way. I believe it's possible to thrive and sustain in this new environment if you are willing to embrace change. Now, although none of us can predict the future, okay, there are really 2 questions we want to leave you with to ponder over the next couple of days. Will the world's most valuable firms sustain their progress in reimagining management? And will average firms be able to catch up? Okay.
Round of applause, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Stuart.
I don't know what's more scary than chaos, but knowing that Mark's got some weapons and I'm trying to stop them all from talking. One thing I can predict is that you're probably all very hungry. So we will be doing that. But again, I thank you so much. You are certainly stewards of positive change. Again, a round of applause for our panelists. I know you're hungry, but also we have got a bit of a holacracy here, a flat system. We want to hear from you. Are there any questions you're desperate to ask? I can grab one, or are you just thinking about food? There's one question there. We'll grab that question. Make it short. Here we go. There we are, sir. A question for the panel.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for that. You were mentioning Unilever, and Paul Polman, of course, was one of those persons that tried to get Unilever into a more sustainable organization rather than just being led by the financial, what do you call them, system. He was removed, and Unilever is back to where they were. What's your comment to that?
There we go.
Yeah, well, I realize that was a challenge for them, but when I looked at my data, I looked at total shareholder return, so TSR, and their numbers popped up at least in the last 3 years. Well, I'm not certain when Paul Polman left. So subsequent to that. So he left, and then the numbers have gone up. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
So it speaks to Steve Denning's point. It's, you can do all sorts of interesting things, but it's all about value creation and financials, and if you miss that, you have the biggest missed opportunity.
Let me just add, though, that I liked your final reference. I think we're very careful to think about the relationship between the productive sector and the financial sector. That's a big thing to think about.